So positioning. How is positioning important to the pelvic floor? So let's first start with this concept of sitting, how we sit. So we want to always think of our body as rings. So looking at this concept of a slinky, we've got all of these rings stacked on top of one another, and we want there to be some space in those rings. So what happens when we sit, we have our pelvis, then the ribs and the shoulders, and we want all of those to line up, stacking just like the rings of the slinky. Knowing that the breathing diaphragm and the pelvic diaphragm have space in between. So as we're sitting, if we sit and we're too far forward, causing more of a curve in our back, or too far back, causing a little bit of a slouch, that now changes how those rings are lined up on top of one another, which then affects not only the breathing diaphragm, but also affects the pelvic diaphragm. So the idea with the pelvic floor is to control this increase of pressure in the abdominal region. So as you breathe in, there's this increased pressure because the breathing diaphragm is trying to push on those abdominal organs, which they need that. They need that for function, but we need that pelvic diaphragm to support to make sure that that doesn't push out of the body. So lining up the rings of the body is very important to make sure that we control that intra-abdominal pressure. When we move on to squatting, a deep squat or a primitive squat position puts a lot of stretch or tension on the pelvic floor. So thinking about getting into that deep position where your feet are a little bit wider and all the way down as low as your hips will let you bend. It's a great stretch for the pelvic floor. It's a good position for it, but it can put a lot of tension on that area. So just being mindful of how the rest of the body is functioning in the breathing position in order to let that function and be able to be smooth. The last position to think about is standing. When we're standing, how we're anchored on our feet makes a difference as to how the pelvis is lined up. So we want to think when we're standing is that we have that weight balanced between the front of the foot and the back. When I say front, I mean the ball of the foot. So we want that sense of equal weight, big toe to little toe, and weight in the middle of the heel. Then we line up that shin bone, second toe, and line it up with the thigh bone so everything stays lined up. That allows our pelvis to line up. When we're standing, we want to think of that pubic bone being parallel to the wall in front. And by that staying parallel, we then can line up that rib cage right over top of our pelvis, keeping that breastbone proud, and then our head sits on top of that. So that ring concept still holds true when we're in standing. We just now have a longer lever of our legs to be standing on. So in this module, we learned about positioning and how it's important to line up all of the bones of our body to improve the best function of our pelvic floor and of course the rest of the muscles in our body. On the next module, we're going to talk about movement and its relationship with the pelvic floor.